The satellite feeds went dark at 3:47 hours, Pacific Standard Time. Not the kind of technical glitch that maintenance crews fix with rebooted servers and fresh coffee. This was different, strategic, surgical. Across 17 monitoring stations spanning 3 continents, the same impossible signature appeared. A single aircraft, call sign unknown, systematically dismantling the most sophisticated surveillance network ever constructed. The Ghost moved through restricted airspace like smoke through fingers, leaving behind only the digital equivalent of silence. In the Pentagon's Crisis Management Center, General Marcus Whitfield stared at the wall of blank screens with the expression of a man watching his life's work dissolve. 23 years of military intelligence, reduced to static. His aide, Colonel Rebecca Torres, stood behind him holding a tablet that might as well have been a paperweight. The data streams that had once painted real-time pictures of global threats now showed nothing but void. "Sir," Torres ventured, her voice careful, "the last confirmed position was grid reference 77 Alpha, approximately 40 kilometers northeast of the Mojave testing range." She paused, studying the frozen timestamp. "That was 6 minutes ago." Whitfield's fingers drummed against the mahogany conference table, a nervous habit that had intensified since the attacks began 3 weeks prior. The enemy, whoever they were, had demonstrated capabilities that defied conventional warfare doctrine. They struck without warning, vanished without trace, and left behind only questions wrapped in classified briefings. "What assets do we have in that sector?" he asked, though he already knew the answer would disappoint him. "Minimal, sir. The area was designated low priority after the budget cuts." Torres scrolled through her tablet, highlighting available resources. "We've got a skeleton crew at Edwards Air Force Base, maybe a dozen aircraft on standby. Most of our heavy assets are deployed overseas." The general's jaw tightened. 3 weeks of phantom attacks, and they were reduced to scrambling weekend warriors and training aircraft. The irony wasn't lost on him. The world's most advanced military, outmaneuvered by shadows. Then the communication system crackled to life. A voice emerged from the static, calm and professional, with an accent that suggested rural origins. "Tower, this is Ghost 77 requesting immediate priority clearance for emergency landing. I have critical intelligence regarding the current threat situation." Whitfield and Torres exchanged glances. Ghost 77 wasn't on any official roster. "Who the hell is Ghost 77? Whitfield demanded. The voice continued, unperturbed by the silence from ground control. "I repeat, this is Ghost 77. I have visual confirmation of the hostile aircraft and am prepared to provide tactical assessment, requesting immediate debriefing with senior command." Torres worked her tablet frantically, cross-referencing call signs and personnel files. After several moments, she looked up with confusion written across her face. "Sir, according to our records, Ghost 77 doesn't exist." The mystery deepened as radar operators confirmed an aircraft approaching Edwards Air Force Base, an aircraft that shouldn't be there, piloted by someone who officially didn't exist, claiming knowledge of an enemy that had confounded their best strategists for 3 weeks. The war was about to take an unexpected turn. Lieutenant Commander Kalina "Ghost" Voss had been circling the desert for 47 minutes, watching the unknown aircraft through her F-35's advanced sensor suite, while her fuel gauge dropped toward critical levels. The enemy pilot was skilled, perhaps the most skilled she'd ever encountered. They flew an aircraft that defied classification, sleek and angular, with stealth characteristics that made it nearly invisible to conventional radar. But Voss had advantages that went beyond technology. She understood the desert, had trained in these skis since she was old enough to see over a cockpit dashboard. Her father, a crop duster turned flight instructor, had taught her to read air currents like others read newspapers. The sky held secrets for those who knew how to listen. "Ghost 77, this is Edwards Tower," came the response finally. "You are cleared for immediate landing, runway 27. Emergency crews are standing by. Upon touchdown, you will be met by security personnel and escorted to debriefing." Voss acknowledged the transmission while maintaining visual contact with the hostile aircraft. It had been shadowing her for the past 12 minutes, neither engaging nor retreating. The pilot seemed to be studying her, learning her patterns, her responses. She felt like a mouse being observed by a particularly patient cat. The F-35 responded to her touch with familiar precision as she began her approach to Edwards. Behind her, the mysterious aircraft maintained its distance, almost as if it were escorting her home. The behavior was unlike anything in their intelligence briefings. These aircraft had shown no interest in prolonged observation. They struck fast, gathered intelligence, and vanished. This felt different, personal. As the runway lights of Edwards grew larger, Voss allowed herself a moment to consider the implications of what she'd witnessed. The enemy aircraft's capabilities suggested technology years ahead of anything in their arsenal. But technology alone didn't explain the tactical brilliance she'd observed. Someone was coordinating these attacks with intimate knowledge of American military procedures and weaknesses. She touched down with the gentleness of a butterfly landing on a flower, her father's voice echoing in her memory. "The best pilots make every landing look easy, even when it's not." The F-35's wheels kissed the tarmac as emergency vehicles flanked her aircraft, their lights painting the desert night in reds and blues. As she taxied toward the designated parking area, Voss caught sight of the hostile aircraft in her mirrors. It had climbed to altitude and was accelerating away from the base, its silhouette disappearing into the star-filled darkness. The message was clear. I let you go this time. The canopy opened with a hydraulic hiss, and immediately she was surrounded by security personnel. Air Force security forces, their weapons drawn but pointed safely downward, formed a protective perimeter around her aircraft. Behind them, she spotted two figures in dress uniforms approaching with the measured pace of senior officers. Lieutenant Commander Voss, called the taller of the two, a general by his bearing and the deference shown by those around him. I'm General Whitfield, Pacific Air Forces. We need to talk. Voss removed her helmet, revealing shoulder-length auburn hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. She was younger than expected, perhaps 32, with the kind of steady confidence that came from years of flying in dangerous conditions. But it was her expression that caught Whitfield's attention. She looked like someone who had seen something that changed everything. General, she acknowledged, climbing down from the aircraft with practiced efficiency. I assume you're here about our uninvited guests. Among other things, Whitfield replied, starting with how you managed to track an aircraft that our entire surveillance network couldn't locate. Voss glanced back at her F-35, then at the horizon where the enemy aircraft had vanished. With respect, sir, your surveillance network was looking in the wrong places. The debriefing room at Edwards Air Force Base hadn't seen this level of activity since the Cold War. Maps covered every available wall space, marked with red pins indicating enemy aircraft sightings and blue pins showing the locations of successful attacks. Coffee cups and energy drink cans littered the tables, testament to the long hours spent trying to understand an enemy that seemed to exist everywhere and nowhere. General Whitfield sat across from Lieutenant Commander Voss, with Colonel Torres documenting every word. The woman before them was not what they'd expected. Her service record showed exceptional marks in training but limited combat experience. She'd been assigned to routine patrol duties, the kind of missions that barely warranted inclusion in classified reports. Yet here she was, the only pilot to maintain visual contact with the enemy for extended periods. Let's start from the beginning, Whitfield said, his voice carrying the weight of too many sleepless nights. You were conducting routine patrol operations when you encountered the hostile aircraft. What made you decide to pursue? Voss leaned back in her chair, her fingers unconsciously tracing the outline of her call sign patch. It wasn't pursuit, sir. It was investigation. The aircraft appeared on my heads-up display at approximately 3:24 hours, bearing 270 degrees, altitude 35,000 feet. But here's what was interesting. It was flying in a pattern I recognized. Recognized how? My father was a crop duster before he became a flight instructor. He taught me to read flight patterns like fingerprints. Every pilot has unconscious habits, ways they bank, climb, descend. This pilot was using patterns I'd seen before, but not in any of our training scenarios. Colonel Torres looked up from her notes. You're suggesting the pilot has knowledge of American training procedures. More than that, Voss replied. I'm suggesting the pilot learned to fly using American training procedures. The turns were too precise. The altitude changes too textbook. This wasn't someone who studied our tactics from the outside. This was someone who learned them from the inside. The implications hung in the air like smoke. If Voss was correct, they weren't dealing with a foreign adversary who had somehow acquired advanced technology. They were dealing with someone who understood American military doctrine at the most fundamental level. Whitfield studied the young pilot with new respect. What else did you observe? The aircraft itself defies conventional classification. It's approximately 60 feet in length, with a wingspan of roughly 40 feet. The design suggests both stealth capabilities and extreme maneuverability. But what caught my attention was the engine signature. It wasn't consistent with any known propulsion system. Explain. Voss stood and moved to the tactical display, her fingers dancing across the digital interface as she called up sensor data from her encounter. Look at this heat signature profile. Traditional jet engines produce a consistent thermal bloom. This aircraft's engines seem to cycle between different power levels without any decrease in performance. It's as if they were operating on entirely different principles. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Advanced aircraft were one thing. The Russians and Chinese had demonstrated impressive capabilities in recent years. But technology that operated on unknown principles suggested something far more serious. Commander, Whitfield said carefully, in your assessment, what level of threat are we dealing with? Voss met his gaze without flinching. Sir, if I'm correct about the pilot's background and the aircraft's capabilities, we're not dealing with a conventional military threat. We're dealing with someone who knows exactly how we think, how we fight, and how we defend ourselves. And they have technology that's years ahead of our own. The silence stretched until broken by Torres. What do you recommend? I recommend we stop treating this as a standard military engagement, Voss replied. Because whoever we're fighting, they're not following standard military doctrine. They're writing their own rules. The next morning brought clear skies and the kind of desert heat that made mirages dance on the runway. Voss stood beside her F-35, conducting her pre-flight inspection with the methodical precision drilled into her by years of training. Each rivet, each panel, each control surface received her attention. In the distance, she could see the bustle of activity as Edwards Air Force Base transformed from a quiet training facility into a forward operating base. Additional aircraft had arrived during the night: F-22 Raptors, F-16 Fighting Falcons, and even a pair of A-10 Warthogs that looked distinctly out of place in what was supposed to be an air-to-air engagement. The message was clear. Nobody knew exactly what they were facing, so they were preparing for everything. "Commander Voss," came a voice behind her. She turned to find a young captain approaching, his uniform crisp despite the early hour. "I'm Captain Marcus Webb, intelligence officer. The general has asked me to brief you on the latest developments." Voss nodded, wiping her hands on a maintenance rag. "What's the situation?" "3 more incidents overnight," Webb reported, consulting his tablet. "One over the Pacific, approximately 200 miles west of Los Angeles. Another over the Nevada desert, near the nuclear test site. The third was different. It occurred over populated areas outside Phoenix." "Different how?" "The previous attacks targeted military installations and classified facilities. This one seemed designed to be seen by civilians. The aircraft made multiple low passes over suburban neighborhoods, stayed long enough for people to get cell phone footage, then vanished." Voss frowned. "That's not consistent with the behavior I observed. The pilot I encountered was careful, methodical. This sounds like someone trying to create panic." "That's what we thought too," Webb agreed. "Until we analyzed the flight path. The aircraft spent exactly 47 minutes over populated areas, the same amount of time you spent tracking the hostile aircraft yesterday." The implication was clear, and it sent a chill down Voss's spine. Whoever was piloting these aircraft wasn't just aware of her encounter. They were responding to it, sending a message. The 47 minutes wasn't coincidence. It was communication. "There's more," Webb continued. "The aircraft over Phoenix transmitted a message on military frequencies before departing. It was brief, but our linguists are analyzing it." "What did it say?" "It was in English, spoken by someone with an American accent. The exact words were, 'Tell Ghost 77 that old friends remember old lessons.'" Voss felt the blood drain from her face. The message was clearly directed at her, but she couldn't place the voice or the reference. Old friends, old lessons. She'd been assigned to routine patrol duties for most of her career, limited contact with other pilots, no involvement in any classified operations that might have made her enemies. "Captain," she said slowly, "I need to see the personnel files for everyone who might have had access to my training records or flight patterns." "Already on it," Webb replied. "But it's going to take time. Your training history spans multiple bases, several instructors, and dozens of fellow pilots. We're talking about potentially hundreds of individuals." As they spoke, The base's early warning system activated, sending a piercing tone across the flight line. Pilots ran toward their aircraft while ground crews prepared for immediate launch. Over the base's public address system, the operations officer's voice crackled. All pilots to ready stations. Hostile aircraft detected approaching from the north. This is not a drill. Voss was already moving toward her F-35, her mind shifting into combat mode. But as she climbed into the cockpit, one thought kept nagging at her. Whoever was out there knew her call sign, knew her flight patterns, and was using that knowledge to draw her into a confrontation. This wasn't random terrorism or foreign aggression. This was personal. The F-35's engine spooled up with a satisfying roar as Voss ran through her pre-flight checklist with practiced efficiency. Around her, the flight line erupted in controlled chaos as pilots prepared for what might be their first direct engagement with the mysterious enemy aircraft. Radio chatter filled the airwaves, a mixture of technical specifications, tactical updates, and barely controlled excitement. Ghost 77, this is Eagle Leader, came the voice of Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Martinez, the squadron commander who'd arrived with the overnight reinforcements. You're designated as tactical advisor for this mission. We're going to hang back and let you take the lead on identification and engagement protocols. Voss acknowledged the transmission while privately questioning the wisdom of the decision. She had the most experience with these aircraft, but she was also the most junior pilot in the formation. The other pilots were skilled, experienced combat veterans who'd flown missions over hostile territory. She'd spent most of her career flying training exercises and patrol routes. As they climbed toward their assigned altitude, Voss found herself thinking about the message from the night before. Old friends remember old lessons. The phrase nagged at her, familiar but just out of reach. She'd heard it before but couldn't place where or when. Contact bearing 040 degrees, altitude 28,000 feet, reported Eagle 2, his voice tight with concentration. Single aircraft, unknown configuration, approaching at high speed. Voss adjusted her sensors and immediately spotted the target. It was the same aircraft she'd encountered the day before, but something was different about its flight pattern. Where before it had been cautious and methodical, now it seemed almost playful. It was executing maneuvers that served no tactical purpose, as if the pilot were showing off. Eagle Leader, this is Ghost 77, she transmitted. Recommend extreme caution. This pilot is demonstrating capabilities we haven't seen before. The words had barely left her lips when the enemy aircraft suddenly rolled inverted and dove toward the desert floor at a rate that should have been impossible for any known aircraft. G-forces that would have rendered any human pilot unconscious seemed to have no effect on its performance. Jesus Christ, breathed Eagle 3. Did you see that? But Voss was focused on something else. As the aircraft had rolled, she'd caught a glimpse of markings on its underside. They were faint, almost invisible, but definitely there, and they looked familiar. Eagle Leader, I need to get closer to that aircraft, she transmitted. I think I recognize something about it. Negative, Ghost 77. Maintain safe distance until we can determine hostile intent. The enemy aircraft leveled out at 5,000 feet and began a series of complex maneuvers that seemed designed to test the limits of its performance envelope. It was a display of technical mastery that would have impressed any aviation enthusiast, but it was also tactically meaningless. Unless Eagle Leader, Voss said suddenly, I think this is a demonstration. The pilot is trying to show us something. Show us what? That they can outperform anything we have in the air. But also, she paused, watching the aircraft execute a particularly complex series of rolls and turns. I think they're trying to communicate. The maneuvers did seem to follow a pattern, almost like an aerial ballet choreographed for an audience. But if it was communication, what was the message? And why use such an elaborate method when the pilot had already demonstrated the ability to transmit on military frequencies? The answer came as the aircraft suddenly changed course and began flying directly toward their formation. But instead of the aggressive approach they'd expected, it maintained a steady speed and altitude, almost as if it were requesting permission to join them. All units maintain formation, ordered Eagle Leader. If that aircraft gets within weapons range, we engage. But Voss was studying the approaching aircraft with growing recognition. The flight profile, the way it handled the controls, even the slight hesitation before each maneuver, it was all familiar. She'd seen this pilot before, flown with them before. Eagle Leader, she transmitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I think I know who's flying that aircraft. The revelation struck Voss like a physical blow. The flight patterns, the maneuvers, the way the aircraft seemed to anticipate her movements. She'd seen it all before, years ago, during advanced flight training at Nellis Air Force Base. There had been another pilot, someone who'd flown with the same distinctive style, the same unconscious habits that made each aviator unique. Eagle Leader, I need to break formation, she transmitted, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her mind. I believe the pilot of that aircraft is someone I trained with. I need to establish direct communication. Negative, Ghost 77. Maintain position until we can confirm hostile intent. But the enemy aircraft was already making the decision for them. It rolled into a steep climb, accelerating at a rate that defied physics, then leveled out directly above their formation. From that position, It began a series of maneuvers that Voss recognized immediately. The same demonstration routine they'd performed together during training exercises years ago. "Eagle Leader," she said, her voice urgent now. "The pilot is trying to identify themselves. Those maneuvers are from our training manual, but they're being executed in a specific sequence. It's like a coded message." "What kind of message?" Voss watched as the aircraft completed the routine with a perfect barrel roll, exactly as she remembered from their training sessions. "I think they're trying to tell me who they are without using radio communications. And if I'm right—" She paused, afraid to voice her suspicions. "If I'm right, then everything we think we know about this situation is wrong." The aircraft above them waggled its wings, a universal aviation signal for recognition, then began to descend slowly toward their formation. But instead of approaching aggressively, it maintained a respectful distance, almost as if its pilot were asking permission to join them. "This is Eagle Leader to all units," Martinez's voice crackled over the radio. "Weapons hold, repeat, weapons hold. Ghost 77, you have authorization to attempt communication with the unknown aircraft." Voss switched to the emergency frequency, her heart pounding as she keyed the microphone. "Unknown aircraft, this is Ghost 77. If you can hear this transmission, please respond with your call sign and intentions." The response came immediately in a voice that confirmed her worst fears. "Hello, Ghost. It's good to see you again. This is Phoenix 11, requesting permission to fly on your wing." Phoenix 11. The call sign hit her like a sledgehammer. She remembered now, remembered the pilot who'd used that designation during their training together at Nellie's. Captain Jennifer Phoenix Reeves, the most skilled aviator in their class, the one who'd pushed everyone to be better, to fly harder, to never accept limitations. But Jennifer Reeves had been killed in a training accident 3 years ago. Voss had attended the memorial service, had watched them fold the flag and present it to her family. She'd mourned the loss of someone who'd been both mentor and friend. "Phoenix 11, she transmitted, her voice barely steady. "This is impossible. Jennifer Reeves died in a training accident in 2022. Did she, Ghost? Or did she simply disappear from the official record when she became inconvenient?" The implication was staggering. If Jennifer Reeves was alive, if she was the pilot of the mysterious aircraft, then everything they'd assumed about the attacks was wrong. This wasn't foreign aggression or terrorism. This was something far more personal, far more dangerous. "Phoenix 11, if you are who you claim to be, then meet me at the coordinates we discussed during survival training. You know the ones I mean." "Roger, Ghost. See you at the old watering hole." The aircraft above them waggled its wings once more. then accelerated away to the east, leaving behind only questions and the growing realization that the war they thought they were fighting was actually something entirely different. The coordinates Jennifer had referenced were burned into Voss's memory like a brand. During survival training at Nellie's, they'd been dropped in the desert with minimal supplies and told to find their way back to base. Most pilots had followed the recommended route, but Jennifer had suggested a shortcut through a narrow canyon where an old mining camp provided shelter and a reliable water source. Now, as Voss flew toward those same coordinates, she wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her career. Everything about this situation violated protocol, military doctrine, and common sense. But Jennifer Reeves had been her friend, her mentor, and someone she'd trusted with her life during training exercises. If she was alive, if she was really the pilot of the mysterious aircraft, then Voss needed to understand why. The canyon appeared below her exactly as she remembered it, a narrow slash in the desert landscape that provided natural concealment from aerial observation. She could see the remnants of the old mining camp, weathered buildings that had somehow survived decades of desert storms and neglect. And there, parked beside the largest structure, was the aircraft she'd been tracking. Up close, it was even more impressive than she'd imagined. The design was clearly advanced, with stealth characteristics that made it nearly invisible to radar. But it was also obviously experimental, with modifications and additions that suggested ongoing development. This wasn't a production aircraft. It was a prototype, possibly one of a kind. Voss landed her F-35 on a flat stretch of desert nearby, her mind racing through the tactical implications of what she was doing. She was alone, in hostile territory, meeting with someone who might be an enemy agent. But as she shut down her engines and prepared to disembark, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to learn something that would change everything. The figure that emerged from the experimental aircraft was unmistakably Jennifer Reeves, though she looked older, harder than Voss remembered. Her flight suit was unmarked, black as midnight with no insignia or identification. But her movements were the same, the confident stride of someone who owned the sky. "Hello, Kalina," she said, using Voss's first name with the familiarity of old friendship. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "Everyone thinks you're dead," Voss replied, her hand instinctively moving toward her sidearm. "There was a memorial service. Your family grieved for you." "My family was told what they needed to be told," Jennifer said, her voice carrying a hardness that hadn't been there years ago. "Just like you were told what you needed to be told about the training accident." "What happened to you?" Jennifer gestured toward the experimental aircraft. "I was recruited for a special project. Black budget, need-to-know basis. They told me I was serving my country, developing next-generation aviation technology that would give us an insurmountable advantage over our enemies. And now I know the truth. The project wasn't about defending America. It was about controlling America. The technology we developed, the aircraft I'm flying, it's all part of a program designed to create a new kind of warfare. One where a few individuals with advanced technology can hold entire nations hostage. Voss felt the pieces beginning to fall into place. The attacks on military installations, the systematic dismantling of surveillance networks, the demonstration of impossible capabilities. It all made sense if Jennifer was trying to expose a conspiracy rather than wage war. "You're not attacking us," she said slowly. "You're trying to warn us." "I'm trying to stop them," Jennifer corrected. "Before they use this technology to start a war that will make every previous conflict look like a playground dispute." As they spoke, Voss became aware of movement in the distance. Multiple aircraft were approaching from the north, flying in formation. The cavalry was coming, but she wasn't sure if they were there to rescue her or to silence both of them. "You need to leave," she told Jennifer. "They're going to try to capture you, and if they succeed, everything you've discovered will disappear into classified files." "I'm not running anymore," Jennifer replied. "It's time to make a stand." The formation of aircraft approaching from the north consisted of 6 F-22 Raptors, flying in perfect formation with the deadly precision of America's most elite pilots. Voss recognized the lead aircraft's markings. It was Colonel Jack Morrison, a man whose reputation for ruthless efficiency was legendary throughout the Air Force. If Morrison was leading this mission, it meant the situation had escalated beyond routine military engagement. "Ghost 77, this is Raptor Leader," Morrison's voice crackled through her radio. "You will immediately return to base for debriefing. The unknown aircraft will surrender or be destroyed." Voss looked at Jennifer, who was standing beside her experimental aircraft with the calm confidence of someone who'd already accepted the inevitable. "They're going to try to kill you," she said. "They've been trying to kill me for 3 years," Jennifer replied. "The difference is that now I'm not running anymore." The F-22s had formed a wide circle around the canyon, their weapons systems undoubtedly locked on Jennifer's aircraft. But Voss noticed something strange about their formation. It was designed for containment, not attack. They wanted to capture Jennifer alive, which suggested that her information was more valuable than her death. "Raptor Leader, this is Ghost 77, Voss transmitted. "I need more time to complete my assessment of the situation. The pilot is providing valuable intelligence about the recent attacks." "Negative, Ghost 77. You have 30 seconds to clear the area before we engage." Jennifer was already moving toward her aircraft, her movements urgent but not panicked. "Kalina, I need you to deliver a message to General Whitfield. Tell him that Project Shadowhawk was compromised from the beginning. Tell him that Senator Harrison knew about the security breaches and allowed them to continue." "I don't understand." "You will," Jennifer said, climbing into her cockpit. "The attacks over the past 3 weeks weren't random. They were designed to force the military to activate emergency protocols, to give certain individuals unprecedented authority over domestic airspace. This whole crisis was manufactured." The implications were staggering. If Jennifer was telling the truth, then the mysterious attacks weren't the work of foreign enemies or terrorist organizations. They were part of an elaborate false flag operation designed to justify expanded military authority over civilian populations. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" Voss asked. "Because in about 10 minutes, you're going to receive orders to engage civilian aircraft that have been classified as hostile by the same people who orchestrated this crisis. And when you refuse, they'll try to court-martial you for disobeying orders." Jennifer's aircraft was already spooling up, its engines producing a sound unlike anything in the conventional arsenal. "Remember what I taught you about reading the sky, Kalina. Sometimes the things that look most threatening are actually trying to protect you." The experimental aircraft lifted off with impossible smoothness, accelerating vertically like a rocket before leveling out and heading directly toward the formation of F-22s. But instead of trying to escape, Jennifer began transmitting on all military frequencies simultaneously. "This is Phoenix 1-1 to all United States military personnel. You are being used as pawns in a conspiracy designed to overthrow constitutional government. The attacks of the past 3 weeks were not conducted by foreign enemies. They were conducted by American personnel using classified aircraft and technology. Do not fire on civilian populations. Do not follow orders that violate your oath to defend the Constitution." The message was being broadcast on every frequency, to every military installation, to every pilot in the air. Within minutes, it would reach thousands of military personnel, creating chaos in the chain of command and forcing everyone to question their orders. "All units engage hostile aircraft immediately," Morrison commanded. "Do not allow it to escape." But as the F-22s moved to attack positions, Voss made a decision that would define the rest of her career. She activated her own weapons systems and positioned herself between Jennifer's aircraft and the attacking formation. "Raptor Leader, this is Ghost 77. I am declaring a no-fire zone around the unknown aircraft pending further intelligence assessment. Any attack on that aircraft will be considered an act of aggression against a United States military asset." The radio silence that followed was deafening. Voss had just committed the most serious breach of military discipline possible. She'd refused a direct order from a superior officer and threatened to fire on her own comrades. But she'd also bought Jennifer precious time to escape and continue broadcasting her message. Ghost 77, you are hereby placed under arrest for mutiny and treason. Morrison's voice cut through the static. Land immediately, or we will consider you hostile. Negative, Raptor leader. I am conducting a lawful investigation of potential criminal activity by senior military personnel. I advise you to stand down pending resolution of this matter. As she spoke, Voss realized that she'd crossed a line from which there was no return. She was now committed to discovering the truth, regardless of the consequences to her career or her life. The war she thought she was fighting had just become very personal. The standoff lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Voss maintained her position between Jennifer's aircraft and the F-22 formation, while her fuel gauge dropped steadily toward critical levels. Below them, the desert stretched endlessly in all directions, offering no sanctuary for aircraft that might soon be classified as hostile by their own military. Jennifer's voice crackled through the radio one final time. Kalina, I'm uploading data files to your aircraft's computer system. Everything I've discovered about Project Shadowhawk, including personnel files, classified documents, and evidence of the conspiracy. Get that information to someone you trust, someone outside the normal chain of command. Before Voss could respond, Jennifer's aircraft suddenly accelerated upward at an impossible angle, climbing toward the stratosphere at speeds that defied physics. The F-22s tried to follow, but their conventional engines couldn't match the performance of the experimental technology. Within seconds, Jennifer had disappeared into the thin air above 50,000 feet. Raptor leader, this is Ghost 77, Voss transmitted. The hostile aircraft has escaped. I am returning to base for debriefing. Negative, Ghost 77. You are ordered to remain in position until escort aircraft arrive to take you into custody. But Voss was already turning toward Edwards Air Force Base, her mind racing through the implications of what she'd just learned. If Jennifer was telling the truth, then the attacks of the past 3 weeks were part of an elaborate conspiracy involving high-ranking military and political figures. The evidence was now in her aircraft's computer system, but she needed to find someone trustworthy to share it with. As she flew toward base, her radio crackled with incoming communications from multiple sources. General Whitfield was demanding immediate debriefing. Colonel Morrison was requesting authorization to pursue and capture her. And scattered throughout the military communication network, she could hear fragments of Jennifer's broadcast message being discussed, analyzed, and debated. The conspiracy was beginning to unravel, but Voss knew that the people behind it wouldn't give up easily. They'd already demonstrated their willingness to sacrifice American military personnel to achieve their objectives. Her life, and Jennifer's, were now forfeit unless they could expose the truth before their enemies could silence them permanently. Landing at Edwards Air Force Base felt like entering enemy territory. The flight line was crowded with security personnel, military police, and senior officers who clearly viewed her as a threat rather than a returning pilot. As she taxied toward the designated parking area, Voss could see General Whitfield waiting beside a convoy of vehicles, his expression grim. The moment her engines shut down, she was surrounded by armed guards. The canopy opened to reveal the barrels of multiple weapons pointed in her direction, held by men who'd been ordered to treat her as a potential enemy combatant. Lieutenant Commander Voss called a voice she didn't recognize. You will exit the aircraft slowly, keeping your hands visible at all times. She complied, moving with deliberate precision to avoid any action that might be interpreted as threatening. As she climbed down from the cockpit, she noticed Colonel Torres approaching with a tablet in her hands, her expression unreadable. "Commander," Torres said quietly, "you're being placed under arrest pending investigation of multiple charges including disobeying direct orders, mutiny, and providing aid to enemy combatants. You have the right to remain silent." "I need to speak with General Whitfield immediately," Voss replied. "I have information about Project Shadowhawk that he needs to hear." Tor's expression didn't change, but Voss caught a flicker of something in her eyes, surprise, perhaps, or recognition. "The general is not available for interviews with suspected traitors." "Then you need to tell him that Senator Harrison is compromised, and that the attacks of